Good morning, friends. In today's session, we are going to have the summary and analysis of Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Now, we'll deal with the summary of Chapter 4 of the novel Animal Farm by George Orwell. By late summer, news of Animal Farm has spread across half the country. Mr. Jones lives ignominiously in Wellington, drinking and complaining about his misfortune. Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Frederick, who own the adjoining farms, fear that disenchantment will spread among their own animals. Their rivalry with each other, however, prevents them from working together against Animal Farm. They merely spread rumors about the farm's inefficiency and moral reprehensibility. Meanwhile, animals everywhere begin singing Beasts of England, which they have learned from flocks of pigeons sent by Snowball, and many begin to behave rebelliously. At last, in early October, a flight of pigeons alerts Animal Farm that Mr. Jones has begun marching on the farm with some of Pilkington's and Frederick's men. Snowball, who has studied books about the battle campaigns of the renowned Roman general Julius Caesar, prepares a defense and leads the animals in an ambush on the men. Boxer fights courageously, as does Snowball, and the humans suffer a quick defeat. The animals' losses amount only to a single sheep whom they give a hero's burial. Boxer, who believes that he has unintentionally killed a stable boy in the chaos, expresses his regret at taking a life, even though it is a human one. Snowball tells him not to feel guilty, asserting that the only good human being is a dead one. Molly, as is her custom, has avoided any risk to herself by hiding during the battle. Snowball and Boxer each receive medals with the inscription Animal Hero First Class. The animals discover Mr. Jones' gun where he dropped it in the mud. They place it at the base of the flagstaff, agreeing to fire it twice a year on October 12th, the anniversary of the Battle of the Cowshed, as they have dubbed their victory, and on Midsummer's Day, the anniversary of the rebellion. Now we'll have the analysis of Chapter 4. This chapter extends the allegory of the Russian Revolution to Russia's interwar period. The spread of animalism to surrounding farms evokes the attempts by Leon Trotsky to establish communism as an international movement. Trotsky believed, as did Karl Marx, that communism could only achieve its goal if implemented on a global scale, and he devoted much of his formidable intelligence and eloquence to setting off what Western leaders later called the domino effect. The domino effect, or domino theory, posted that the conversion or fall of the non-communist state to communism would precipitate the fall of other non-communist governments in nearby states. Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson used this theory to justify their military involvement in Greece, Turkey, and Vietnam, countries they hoped to save from the spread of communism. In Animal Farm, the proprietors of the neighboring farms fear a similar contagion, which we might term the snowball effect, just as the West tried to discredit Russian communism, so do Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Frederick spread disparaging rumors about Animal Farm. Just as diplomatic skirmishes between the West and Russia ended up bolstering Trotsky and his allies, the armed skirmish between humans and animals ends up strengthening the animals' hold on the farm. In this chapter, Orwell makes masterful use of irony, an important component of satirical writing, to illustrate the gap between what the animals are fighting for and what they believe they are fighting for. All the animals, except Molly, fight their hardest in the Battle of the Cowshed, but as chapter 3 demonstrates, they do not fully understand the ideals for which they fight, the principles that they defend. In putting all of their energies toward expelling the humans, the animals believe that they are protecting themselves from oppression. In reality, however, they are simply and unwittingly consolidating the pig's power by muting the primary threat to the pig's regime, the human menace. Moreover, though the animals are prepared to give their lives in defense of Animal Farm, they appear unprepared to deal with the consequences of their fight. Boxer is horrified when he thinks that he has killed the stable boy. Snowball's emphatic declaration after the battle of the need for all animals to be ready to die for Animal Farm sets up Orwell's scrutiny of the motivations behind mass violence and manipulative leadership. Many readers have assumed that Animal Farm, in its critique of totalitarian communism, advocates the Western capitalist way of life as an alternative. Yet, a closer reading suggests that Orwell may take a more complicated stance, for if the animals represent the Russian communists and the farmers represent non communist leaders, we see that Orwell denounces the communist but also portrays the non communist in a very harsh light. Mr. Jones proves an irresponsible, neglectful farm owner, and neither Mr. Pilkington nor Mr. Frederick hesitates to squash violently any animal uprising that threaten his own supremacy. There is nothing noble in the men's unprovoked attack on Animal Farm. They undertake this crusade merely out of self-interest. This is what the analysis of chapter 4. Now I'll deal with the summary of chapter 5 in the same session. In chapter 5, Molly becomes an increasing burden on Animal Farm. She arrives late for work, accepts treats from men associated with nearby farms, and generally behaves contrary to the tenets of animalism. Eventually, she disappears, lured away by a fat, red-faced man who stroked her coat and fed her sugar. Now she pulls his carriage. None of the other animals ever mentions her name again. During the cold winter months, the animals hold their meetings in the big barn, and Snowball and Napoleon's constant disagreements continue to dominate the proceedings. Snowball proves a better speaker and debater, but Napoleon can better canvass for support in between meetings. Snowball brims with ideas for improving the farm. He studies Mr. Jones' books and eventually concocts a scheme to build a windmill, with which the animals could generate electricity and automate many farming tasks, bringing new comforts to the animals' lives. But building the windmill would entail much hard work and difficulty, and Napoleon contends that the animals should attend to their current needs rather rather than plan for a distant future. The question deeply divides the animals. Napoleon surveys Snowball's plans and expresses his contempt by urinating on them. When Snowball when Snowball has finally completed his plans, all assemble for a great meeting to decide whether to undertake the windmill project. Snowball gives a passionate speech to which Napoleon responds with a pathetically unaffecting and brief retort. Snowball speaks further, inspiring the animals with his descriptions of the wonders of electricity. Just as the animals prepare to vote, however, Napoleon gives a strange whimper, and nine enormous dogs wearing brass studded collars charge into the bar, attack Snowball, and chase him off the farm. They return to Napoleon's side, and with the dogs growling menacingly, Napoleon announces that from now on meetings will be held only for ceremonial purposes. He states that all important decisions will fall to the pigs alone. Afterward, many of the animals feel confused and disturbed. Squilla explains to them that Napoleon is making a great sacrifice in taking the leadership responsibilities upon himself, and that, as the cleverest animal, he serves the best interest of all by making the decisions. These statements placate the animals, though they still question the expulsion of Snowball. Squilla explains that Snowball was a traitor and a criminal. Eventually, the animals come to accept this version of events, and Boxer adds greatly to Napoleon's prestige by adopting the maxims I will work harder and Napoleon is always right. These two maxims soon reinforce each other when, 3 weeks after the banishment of Snowball, the animals learn that Napoleon supports the windmill project. Squilla explains that their leader never really opposed the proposal. He simply used his apparent opposition as a maneuver to oust the wicked Snowball. These tactics, he claims, serve to advance the collective best interest. Squiller's words prove so appealing, and the growls of his three dogs entourage so threatening that the animals accept his explanation without question. Now we'll see the analysis of chapter 5. This chapter illuminates Napoleon's corrupt and power-hungry motivations. He openly and unabashedly seizes power for himself, banishes Snowball with no justification, and shows a bald-faced willingness to rewrite history in order to further his own ends. Similarly, Stalin forced Trotsky from Russia and seized control of the country after Lenin's death. Orwell's experience in a persecuted Trotskyist political group in the late 1930s during the Spanish Civil War may have contributed to his comparatively positive portrayal of Snowball. Trotsky was eventually murdered in Mexico, but Stalin continues to evoke him as a phantom threat, the symbol of all enemy forces, when he began his bloody purges of the 1930s. These purges appear in allegorized form in the next chapters of Animal Farm. Lenin once famously remarked that communism was merely socialism plus the electrification of the countryside, a comment that reveals the importance of technological modernization to leaders in the young Soviet Union. The, certain, the centrality of the electrification projects in the Soviet Union inspired the inclusion of the windmill in Animal Farm. Communist leaders considered such programs absolutely essential for their new nation, citing their need to upgrade an infrastructure neglected by the Tsars and keep up with the relatively advanced and increasingly hostile West. Russia devoted a great deal of brain and manpower to putting these programs in place. As suggested by the plot of Animal Farm, Stalin initially balked at the idea of a national emphasis on modern technology, only to embrace such plans wholeheartedly once he had secured his position as dictator. This chapter lies near the middle of Orwell's narrative and in many ways represents the climax of the tension that has been building from the beginning. Since the animal's initial victory over Mr. Jones, we have suspected the motives of the pig intelligentsia and Napoleon in particular. Ever since the revelation in chapter 3 that they have been stealing apples and milk for themselves, the pigs have appeared more interested in grabbing resources and power than in furthering the good of the farm. Now, when Napoleon sets his dogs on Snowball, he proves that his socialist rhetoric about the common good is quite empty. The specifics of Napoleon's takeover bespeak a long period of careful plotting. Napoleon has been deliberating his seizure of power ever since he first took control of the dog's training in chapter 3. Thus, the banishment of Snowball constitutes the culmination of long held resentments and aspirations and climactically justifies our feelings of uneasiness about Napoleon. In his use of the dogs, Napoleon has monopolized the farm's sources of defense and protection. The dogs could have guarded the farm and warded off predators in order to create his own private secret police. The pigs claim a parallel monopoly on logic. Squealer linguistically transforms Napoleon's self-serving act of banishing Snowball into a supreme example of self-sacrifice and manages to convince the animals that no contradiction underlies the leader's abrupt about face on the issue of the windmill. Each of Napoleon's acts of physical violence thus gains acceptance and legitimacy via a corresponding exercise of verbal violence. Political subversion depends on a subversion of logic and language. The connection between these two forms of violence and subversion remained a central concern for Orwell throughout his life, and he examines it both in later chapters of Animal Farm and in his last major novel, 1984. This is all about chapter 5. Already now we have gone through the summary and analysis of chapter 4 and 5. In the next session, we are going to deal with the summary of chapter 6. Thank you.